Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review of Star Trek Discovery Season 2, Episode 7, Light and Shadows. This video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Discovery, so I have to start with a spoiler warning for Star Trek Discovery up to Season 2, Episode 7. If you haven't seen up to this point, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So, this episode was incredibly underwhelming. I really thought this episode was quite average. I don't know if I'd go as far to say it was a bad episode. I think the worst episode of the season is still definitely episode 3. I think that it's still the worst of the season, so I don't think this is worse than that. But yeah, I wasn't very impressed with this episode, I gotta be honest. It was really weird because this is the episode we finally see Spock. And this is something they've been building up to for 7 episodes. Like, ever since the start of the season, they've been building up, oh, where's Spock, where's Spock, we're trying to find Spock, and they finally find Spock, and it's not that interesting. So that's very weird. Anyway, let me get into the episode. Let me start actually with a positive, something I liked. I like the fact that the episode begins with Burnham going off the Vulcan while Pike and the people on Discovery have their own adventure with the anomaly. And I actually like that. I think this is something that the show should do more often. They should split characters up and focus on multiple storylines rather than everyone being on Discovery. In fact, I like the fact that the character they split off is Burnham, so she's not always the main focus of the show. She's not, the hero that always solves everything, the Wesley Crusher, shall we say, and she's off doing something else. So Pike and the others are, have their own. You get to see the dynamic of Discovery without Burnham, which is interesting. Not saying that they should get rid of her, but it's interesting to get different perspectives a lot. And I think if the show was more like, because it has a serialized nature, so if it wanted to be more like Game of Thrones or The Expanse or something like that, they should have multiple storylines going at the same time, which I think would actually make it more interesting. Here we just have a split focus, 2 storylines, which, is quite common in a lot of shows. A lot of Star Trek shows do episodes like this as well, so it's nothing that big, but or new, but it's kind of new for Discovery. They might have done this a couple times before, but I particularly think this is a noteworthy time. Now, let me start with the Discovery storyline, the Pike storyline with the weird time anomaly thingy. So that this storyline actually reminded me a lot of the Next Generation episode We'll Always Have Paris. If you recall that episode from the first season of Next Generation, the masterpiece that was, there's an episode where Picard was like reunited with this ex-lover that she saw like 2 decades ago and hadn't seen her since, and she's remarried, but he's a scientist. So that's the main storyline, but then you got a side plot of like the scientist was messing around with like time or something, so time keeps fracturing. And at one point you see like 3 different datas all standing next to each other, and they're like, oh, which one of us is in the current timeline, which is a cool scene within itself. And also you get other, scenes where Picard, Riker, and Turbolift, and the doors open and they see Picard, Riker, and Data waiting for the Turbolift. So it's like time messing up. So it was kind of cool, but the episode itself, was not very good because it was focused more on that boring storyline with Picard reuniting with the lover, which I didn't care about. And they played around with the concept of time and time travel and time distortion, but it was just like dressing. It was just setting dressing, if you know what I'm saying. It didn't actually drive the plot or have anything to do with the story, and that's how I felt about this episode here. I mean, as cool as it was to see, Pike go stand and they see a shadow of Pike over there, and when they were on the shuttle closer to the anomaly, like Pike sees vision of himself killing Tyler, but that actually never comes to pass, so what was the point? I don't really get it. And so they play with this weird time, stuff, but it doesn't actually, it's just an excuse for a lame technobabble Actually, I wouldn't say lame, because it wasn't a bad storyline. I should make that clear. But as an excuse for a technobabble plot, like this is something I talk about. Next Generation and Voyager, and particularly do this a lot, where they have two different storylines. One's a character story, and the other is a technobabble nonsense, where it's a weird anomaly, and it does feel like, I don't know if this would be like, I wouldn't call this a clear cut, classic textbook case of an episode like that, but it is kind of similar. It did remind me a lot about it, because Burnham, what she's doing is, you could argue it's more than just a character story, but really it's about her relationship with Spock, so it is really a character story. And then you get the side plot with the weird anomaly BS. Although, I will say that this wasn't as bad as some of the technobabble nonsense we get from Next Generation and Voyager, particularly Next Gen, where the technobabble, where the anomaly thing doesn't matter. Because I think, and I'll talk about this a bit later, that some of the things set up in this episode will have impact on the story going forward, which is why I wouldn't say this is a textbook case of that kind of episode, because this isn't a throwaway storyline with the anomaly, because I think it will have impact on what's going on, and it does set up some sort of mysteries as we get in. But so I wouldn't say, as I said, I wouldn't say I hated this storyline or thought it was boring, but it was okay. It was fine. It was just, it was interesting. But I think they, as I said, it reminded me of that Next Gen episode, because they didn't really do much with the time shifts. The time shifts were kind of just there as a setting, like, oh, look, isn't it cool? They see shadows of themselves. But I think they could have done a lot more with it. If they're going to introduce the concept of time travel, then do something with it. Now, granted, this could be setting up for them doing something more interesting with time travel. And if that's the case, well, good. I'll be happy, but it still doesn't change the fact that this is okay. It just doesn't change the fact that they could have done more with the story in this episode itself. And so we get, what I mean by, like, they might be setting up for things. Well, first of all, we get the probe returns, and it's like this weird squid thingy that attaches itself to the shuttle. Now, the imagery was obviously very inspired by, what was it, 2,000 Leagues Under the Sea, with the giant squid attacking the submarine. That the imagery was definitely with the probe thing attached with its tentacles. It was definitely inspired by that, which is fine. And but the probe itself, especially like once the tentacles got inside the shuttlecraft and started attacking Pike and Tyler, that looked exactly like the things from the Matrix, if you know what I'm saying. That, like, I can't remember what they call them. It's been a while since I've seen those movies, but not when they were in the Matrix, but when they were in actual real life and they were attacking Zion, or the ships they had. There was like these squid, mechanical thingies that attacked them, and it looks exactly like that. While I was watching the scene, I was even like, I could hear the music from the Matrix in my mind, like, like, it seemed like this was a scene right out of the Matrix with the squid things attacking them. But whatever, not really gonna hold that against it. So the squid thingy probe is definitely a mystery that they're setting up for, because they say it came from 500 years in the future. Why is it? Who is this? Why did it attack the shuttle? Why is it downloading the information? Who modified it? For what purpose? So all these are big questions going forward. So hopefully they will pay them off, and that they do pay them off in an interesting way. Maybe I'll look on this episode more positively, or particularly this storyline. So I do think this could be good setup, but I can't say for sure without knowing where they're going with this. But I am intrigued. I will say that. And because you got a lot of theories about what it could be, because and it's funny because it's like 500 years in the future, they said. So that would place it. So Next Gen, I think, is just 100 years in the future. So that places it way beyond the Next Gen timeline. So hopefully they won't tie it into anything like that. Although it might take place along the timeline with the people from the future, for like Daniels or whatever. Maybe they could tie it to the no, well they were the 29th century, so we're in the 23rd century. So 500. No, it's a century before that. Okay, do the math in my head. So it's before the Daniels, so we can't get any of the temporal Cold War stuff unless they start a bit earlier. So I don't know. I actually hope that they don't have it be something established. I mean, they could have it be something established in the future Trek series, which may be interesting. I heard a theory out that it was future Michael Burnham, and God damn it, I hope that's not the case. I really, really desperately hope that like the Red Angel itself is the future Michael Burnham. I desperately hope that's not the case. I heard another theory that it was the Iconians. That I think would be more interesting. I'd be down for it being the Iconians, but probably won't be. I'm not expecting it to be. It's probably going to be something completely original, but as I said, I'll have to see where they go with this. And it kind of annoys me how Pike assumes that the Red Angel's hostile now, just because I think that's very idiotic of him, first of all. Just because those things, the Matrix things attacked him, they think, oh, well, that was probably the Red Angel because they're all connected. It never occurs to him that it could be two different factions. Maybe the Red Angel is fighting against this thing, which personally I think is going to clearly be the case. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think if they did that, that would be the easy, most predictable route to go. That there's this other faction from the future that's fighting against the Red Angel. It reminds me of the Temporal Cold War thing from Enterprise. So that would be the predictable way to go. I'm actually hoping they don't go that way because it would be too predictable, but we'll see. I think that's I mean, Pike should have at least considered that possibility instead of jumping to the conclusion that, oh, Tyler's right, that maybe he's right and the thing is hostile, which is a fucking idiotic conclusion. I think Tyler's an idiot for coming to this conclusion in the first place. Pike's an even bigger idiot for entertaining this conclusion, because you clearly saw in the last episode what they did for the Kelpians. And before, how they saved a bunch of humans from World War III and put them in. I mean, they're obviously benevolent, and so it's so idiotic to even entertain the possibility. Anyway, so it ends with the cliffhanger of, you see this computer program trying to infiltrate Discovery, and then it latches itself to Arium, the sort of, I don't know if she's an artificial life form or an android. They really didn't explain what she is, which I hope they do get more into. I mean, they're gonna use her as a main plot point going forward. I hope they give her some background. Tell us more about her. What planet is she from? What's the deal with her? But anyway, she's infected with the thingy. So hopefully that will lead to an interesting storyline going forward. And actually, I kind of like that setup. I like it better than some of the things they did with season 1 with Lorca being from the Mirror Universe. Not happy about that. And what they did with Ash Tyler. I think setting things up like that is interesting. Now, let me also talk about Pike's character story, because this was very throwaway, not handled very well, in my opinion. Because the whole time, they're in the shuttle, they're trying to do this thing, and Tyler's being very obtuse, and all of a sudden, when Pike gives personally reasonable orders, he's like, oh, you're just here because you want an action because you missed the war, blah, blah, blah. And that dialogue that he said seemed to come out of nowhere. It's in my opinion, it just seemed very abrupt and not having anything to do with anything. So, when he said stuff like that, I'd be like, oh, shut up, Tyler, and just follow the fucking orders. And then at the end of the episode, Pike's like, oh yeah, you were right about me, I just wanted some action. Now let me be clear, I think that is an interesting concept, it's an interesting idea. I just think the execution here was very off. It was very poor execution with Tyler, because the dialogue felt really out of place, and then Pike admitting it, because this is a case of show not tell, where here they're telling us that Pike wants the action adventure, where I didn't really get that through his actions, and I think they were a bit too blunt and hit you over the head with it. Oh yes, this is what Pike's doing, and it doesn't fit to me. So that part just didn't work at all for me, if I'm being honest. Anyway, let me move over to the Burnham storyline, where we finally meet Spock, and it happens like so easily. Like after all these misleads, all this, oh, there's Spock's in the shuttle, oh, we gotta find Spock, all of a sudden she just goes to Vulcan and he's there. Hi, Spock. Now granted, it wasn't that simple. She had to like get her, sort of manipulate her mother and be like, try to be like, look, I know you're hiding him. I can tell you're lying to me. Which, all that stuff was somewhat interesting, but it was still kind of easy that, oh, she's just hiding him. He came for her to help for some reason, and then he's like affected by something. He's going crazy, just repeating things over and over again. And these things were okay to me. I didn't really have any issues with them, and I didn't think they were great. They were just passable. I mean, it was interesting seeing the family dynamic between Burnham and Sarek and Amanda. Especially interesting when Sarek showed up, and how they have different ways of dealing. And Amanda was wanting to protect Spock, didn't want her to take him in. But here's where everything goes wrong. Sarek suggests that Burnham take Spock to Section 31, and Burnham agrees. What? What? Now, there's only one reason I can see why Sarek made this suggestion and why Burnham took the suggestion, and there's only one reason that would logically explain why this happened, and that is plot convenience. That's the only explanation. None other explanation, nothing else fits. Because why the fuck would Sarek suggest this? Why would Burnham, even after he suggested, be like, no, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard of. And like, Sarek tries to give us some logical explanation. I'm like, well, it makes the most sense. No, but logic is flawed, and it turns out to be the case because, sure enough, you find out Section 31 is not to be trusted, which, joy, if you're going to take it to anywhere, why not take it to Discovery? I mean, that would make the most sense. Take him to Captain Pike. I mean, that was the whole thing to begin with, is that Burnham and Pike were like made a pact to find Spock before Section 31 could. And I know they had the episode where they were like shook hands and supposed to be all buddy now, but still, even though they were trying to be buddy with Section 31, they still shouldn't trust them, and they should know better not to trust them. Why doesn't she take Spock to Discovery? And if not Discovery, why not just Starfleet? A Starfleet headquarters. Although Discovery would be better. Taking them to a secret Black Ops, dirty tactics team that is have very questionable morals. Why the fuck would you do that? It just makes zero sense. I don't follow Sarek's logic here at all. And then, so, they take him to Section 31, and sure enough, like, Georgiou comes to Burnham because, Leland tries to convince her, oh, no, it's all good, we'll treat him well, and I understand, why don't you go rest, have some R&R, we'll take care of Spock for you. And then Georgiou comes to Burnham, it's like, nah, he's lying, they're just gonna kill him. So, that scene actually really irritated me, because first of all, I don't know Georgiou if I should take her at face value, if she's to be trusted. I think from everything that's happening in the episode after this point, I get the impression that she is being straightforward and on the up and up, and that Leland was going to kill her, but Georgiou is not necessarily a reliable source. So to me, there's still always that possibility that she was just completely bullshitted and made that up for whatever purpose, for her own nefarious purpose, whatever the hell they may be. I don't know. So that uncertainty there really irritates me, to be honest. I don't think it's very good storytelling. It doesn't make sense why she brought Spock to them in the first place, so she would have to break him out. Well, yeah, of course, it's your own fault you had to break him out. And then we had the fake fight scene with Georgiou and Burnham, which went on for far too long. All they needed to do is do the whole Kirk thing where you karate chop the soldier and he knocks out unconscious. Oh, the original series. Anyway, but, okay, maybe not that. But, that fight scene was not interesting. It was really boring because, they were just, like, they were just faking it anyway or whatever. I mean, you could tell that Burnham actually was, like, hates Giorgio and was punching for real, and she was fighting back, but still it was fake stakes because Giorgio wanted Burnham to get away anyway. So why did they waste so much time fighting too? I kept thinking during this long fight scene, what if the Section 31 guards show up in time because they can see this on the security footage or whatever, and they stop Burnham before she's able to free Spock because they're taking too much fucking time doing this fake fight. So yeah, that was annoying, and so then they break out Spock, and Leland sees right through Giorgio and was like, yeah, why? You let him go? Why'd you do that? And she's like, what are you talking about? Look at the footage. You can see me kicking ass. And then we get the huge bomb dropped where Giorgio's like, well, if you try to press me, then I'll tell Burnham that you were responsible for killing her parents. Oh my god, what a huge revelation that I absolutely give no shit about whatsoever. I do not care. Oh my god, Leland was responsible for killing Burnham's parents? I don't give a shit. I'm sorry. I frankly do not care. One iota. It seems like a really lame storyline. Now, let me get into my weekly rant about Section 31. Now, if you've seen my previous videos, I ranted a bit about how this is not Section 31. That they should just came up with a new name for it because they don't. The key, like the milestone, the defining character trait of Section 31 as established in previous Trek shows, Deep Space Nine and Enterprise, is that they're autonomous, is that they work outside of Starfleet and the Federation. They have no oversight whatsoever, and that's what makes them dangerous. And in Discovery, that's not the case, and that's the defining characteristic of them, so they're not Section 31. No autonomy, no Section 31, and it's totally implausible that, they were under Starfleet back in Discovery, and then later, a century later, they'll be autonomous. No. That's not how they're established. They were established always, forever, and always being autonomous. So it's clearly established. Now, let me make one thing extremely clear, especially in this episode as it pertains to this episode itself. I don't hate Section 31 because it violates canon or it's inconsistent with continuity. That annoys me, don't get me wrong, but that's not why I keep bringing it up, and that's not why I hate Section 31, because there's a lot of things and a lot of Star Trek shows, not just Discovery, that violate continuity, but I'm okay with because it's ultimately good storytelling. Like, there's a lot of the continuity and canon issues and Discovery that a lot of people love to bitch about that I couldn't care less about. I don't really care. Like, the whole thing about the holo technology, I mean, yeah, sure, it's inconsistent, but I don't really care because it makes sense for Discovery. And the whole thing with the spore drive, like, I knew they were going to come up with an explanation to explain that away, so I don't care. That doesn't bother me. But the reason why the Section 31 thing does bother me is because it's not good storytelling. If they're going to make such a violent violation of continuity, there needs to be a good reason for doing it. And they're actually making things worse, not better. Now, here's my main point. This is the main thing that bothers me about it, is that if Section 31 were actually Section 31, as presented in previous Star Trek canon, where they were very ominous, autonomous, with no oversight, it would be a fuck ton more interesting than this whatever new version of Section 31 is. That would actually, because every time they mention, we're going to take them to Section 31, I'm like, that's not Section 31. And if it was, if they were like this autonomous group with no oversight to the Federation and they're doing it for their own nefarious purposes, that would actually up the stakes. It would be a fuck ton more interesting. And so why did they change it, violate canon, just to do something worse? It makes no sense to me. And also, leaving all that aside, let's leave aside the continuity and whatever, and just say none of the other Star Trek shows existed, and I'm just judging Section 31 as they're presented here in Discovery. I think these guys are cheesy. I don't think they're really interesting. I don't buy them as an interesting unit. I don't buy Leland and Giorgio's relationship. I think they're poorly conceived team. Now, when I first heard of the idea that they were going to do a Section 31 spinoff with Giorgio, I was actually open to this. I was like, that could be interesting. Maybe so, maybe not. I'll keep my mind open. I'll wait and see. But seeing how they're presented in this season, I think a Section 31 spinoff with Giorgio would suck. I think they're by far the worst part of Season 2 of Discovery. I think if Season 2 of Discovery just left out the Section 31 storyline entirely, the season would have been much better. And so if they do a whole entire show about them, it's gonna suck balls. I'm sorry, but they would have to do some major changes to make me like a spinoff with these, who I don't even like as side characters. I think they're flat, they're uninteresting, I don't give a shit about them. But anyway, rant over. That's my mandatory rant about Section 31 that I do weekly now, apparently. But hopefully I won't have too many more of those. So anyway, the episode ends because Spock is repeating numbers and Burnham figures out they're backwards, and so she puts them in the computer to try to figure out what do these numbers mean. And so, first of all, it's funny when she said, let me put these ordered numbers in and give me all of the correlations for these numbers in the exact order. You know what I expected the computer to do when she did that? I expected the computer to come up with like 600 possibilities. I mean, at least 5, because we've seen other Next Generation episodes and stuff where they input something. Because you got to realize, like, the database is spanning like worlds, like hundreds of worlds and histories. I mean, imagine all the historical, different cultural implications a word or a set of numbers may have just on modern times, just on planet Earth. Now take that and times it times 1,000, times like 2,000. So any set of random numbers should generate at least like 100 results. But whatever, just a little nitpick there. Leaving that aside, because the show wants to get right to the point and not meander, which, fair enough. They find that the numbers correspond to the coordinates of Talos 4. Now, if you're watching my video, I'm assuming you're a big enough nerd or Trek fan to get the reference to Talos 4. I mean, maybe not. Maybe there's a few people who didn't get the reference, but Talos 4 is the planet that Pike and Spock and the Enterprise crew went to in the original pilot, The Cage. Now, Discovery, I believe, is set about 3 years or 4 years, maybe 3 years after 3 years after The Cage. So they assume that they had already went and the events of The Cage had already happened. This is 3 years later. I'm not happy about this. I don't know. Again, it's just a name. I'll reserve my main judgment until I see where they're actually going about this. But I will say I'm not excited. I'm not intrigued, shall we say? Because I remember before season 2 started, I talked about all the needless and ridiculous references that season 1 did, and I specifically said I hope that they didn't bring up the events of The Cage, that they didn't be like, oh yeah, we went to this planet and it was quite a menagerie. And it seems like by actually going to Talos 4, that's even worse. I mean, what? I must admit, I think it would be cool to see Discovery's version of the Talosians and how they fit into this Red Angel thing. And maybe they're the Red Angel. I don't know. But I'd be curious to see how that fits into everything. But I think the just come up with something original. Stop beating a dead horse. Stop going back to references. It's really annoying. Anyway, my rating for Light and Shadows out of 10 is a 5 average. As I said, there's some things I liked about the episode. I think the time anomaly thing, even though it was kind of a side plot, I did enjoy it. I think it was better than a lot of the useless side plots because I think it will tie into more of the future of the storyline, and it could turn out to be really great. I'm not sure. I'll reserve judgment until I see it, but it's very intriguing that they're introducing these ideas and having Stamets coming in and having to save them. That all worked. That it was really interesting storytelling, and the thing with Arian being taken over by the computer program, it was very ominous setup. It was all good stuff. The Pike character stuff, as I said, it was really throwaway and handled very badly, but for the most part I did enjoy that storyline. Now the Burnham stuff I think was good right up until they said, "Oh, take Spock to Section 31." That's when the story sucked. That's when it went downhill. Before then, it was fine, even though it was kind of easy of them finding Spock. You got a good character, family dynamics between Spock, Sarek, and Burnham and Amanda. So that was interesting. But then the whole Section 31, I just don't like Section 31. I think they're treated very poorly. I don't like their interest in the story. They're being obtuse for taking them to Section 31. It was done solely for plot convenience, plot purposes, the only reason whatsoever, and I just did not like it. Anyway, that is it for my review of Star Trek Discovery Season 2, Episode 7, Light and Shadows. I will be back. Please join me tomorrow. I have a very special event going, which at the day I'm releasing this video will be tomorrow, Saturday night in the U.S., I will be doing a live discussion with my brother, Apkin Tomko, who has his own channel, Apkin Tomko, where he does Discovery reviews, which you should check out if you haven't seen. And also joining us as a special guest, Wes from the Penske File podcast, who I believe has an even dimmer view of Discovery than I do. So he does a really good, thoughtful podcast every week about Discovery, and also reviewing Deep Space Nine, so you should also check that out if you haven't. But anyway, the three of us are going to get together. Should be a very interesting discussion with a lot of different opinions and viewpoints. So it should be great to talk about the first half of Discovery, all 7 episodes of Season 2, and what we think of the season so far. I'll put a link for that video in the description below. And I'll also be back, of course, next week and the following weeks to continue to cover Star Trek Discovery. So check that out and check out my channel as I do many more videos and other Star Trek shows, and also cover other shows like Game of Thrones, The Expanse, Lost, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.